Who cares about the NFL draft? We've got ACC power rankings plus news and notes from across college football after the stinger. Good morning and welcome to Good Morning College Football, episode 41. I am Nicholas Ian Allen of CFB Winning Edge and CampusToCanton.com. Thank you for joining us on this Friday morning. Happy Friday to everyone. And I'm sure everyone was tuned in late last night for the first round of the NFL draft. Pretty wild first round. Certainly one of the most unexpected that I remember, but we're not going to spend very much time talking, or really any time talking about the NFL draft, because I'm sure you're getting that information elsewhere. We are going to dig into ACC power rankings, our fourth power conference that we will discuss somewhat at length so far in our show this spring. But also we've got a few more spring game takeaways. We've got some news and notes and injury worth watching in the Big 12. But before we get to that, of course, thank you for joining us live. Thank you very much for giving this video a like on the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. Thank you for subscribing there. That means a lot to us. And of course, if you are a subscriber to CampusToCanton.com, where you can join for as little as $2.99 per month, you get access to a ton of written content. There's a bunch of stuff on the site from this week, a lot of CFF content that I'm looking to dig into very soon. Some quarterbacks that you should be targeting specifically. Saw that, haven't read it just yet, but we'll look to do so as soon as we wrap up here today. But we've got tools, we've got a ton of information, access to our Discord community where you can interact with other members at the site as well as contributors. The founders are in there all the time as well. So anytime you've got a question, there is plenty of opportunity for folks to jump in and discuss college football, fantasy football, just a wide range there. But of course, if you're interested in accessing everything that we offer at CampusCanton.com, you may be interested in our C2C Winning Edge and all 22 tiers that get you access to our full returning production database, which we talk about a lot here on the show. Individual team pages for all 134 FBS teams tell you who's coming back, who's not, where are they out of eligibility? They move on to the NFL draft, or are they transferring in or out elsewhere, and where did they go? So if you want, the full breakdown of those players, their stats, what's moving in and out, and where that impacts the rankings as far as returning production goes, that is available again at our C2C Winning Edge and all 22 tiers at CampusToCanton.com. And then the next big thing on our list, and really the biggest, and what we're going to discuss a little bit here today, our team strength power rankings at CFB Winning Edge are part of our team profiles. And those are going to be published in early May. May 8th is our target date. And we have wrapped up all of the Power Five. That's sort of a really slow, meticulous process. It does tend to speed up now that we've hit, getting into the group of five, and those are well underway. So feel good about getting to publish those team profiles here in just a couple of weeks now. So on that note, and real quick, got a little something in my throat. Pardon me. On that note, let's talk a little bit about our ACC power rankings. And if you've joined us for the first 40 episodes of Good Morning College Football, if you've listened to the CFB Winning Edge podcast early in the spring before we took a little bit of a step away to finish up these team profiles, we've discussed our power rankings a bit. And if this is your first time with us, The team strength power rankings have no opinion in them whatsoever. Not my opinion. The only thing that I'm involved with is setting the weights for the what we're going to be throwing into our calculations that ends up spitting out these power rankings. So I personally have nothing to do with it. If you want to say, hey, watch the games, nerd, that doesn't factor in here. That has absolutely nothing to do with it. So you may tell me, oh, this team is absolutely, so much better. You can see it. Yeah, you might be right. You absolutely might be. But that's not something that goes into our power rankings. We take a look at how these teams stack up. Pardon me. How these teams stack up on paper. Specifically, the biggest piece of the puzzle for us is what we call our roster strength ratings. And I've mentioned this 100 times or more before, so bear with me if you've heard it a bunch. But we take the recruiting ratings that the very, very smart folks in the recruiting industry have put a lot of time and effort into. We take those raw numbers and then we adjust them for experience and career production. We try to give a way for players who were underrated coming into college an opportunity to improve their rating. They do that with on-field production. We also take into account some adjustments that are made for transfers, especially guys moving up. The sites have really started to incorporate those ratings adjustments over the last couple of years. That's been very, very helpful for us as well. We use those ratings. They give us individual player ratings that we call video game ratings or VGR, very similar to what you'll see on the College Football 25 video game, Madden, FIFA, things like that. Think that when you're thinking of our individual player ratings. We take those individual player ratings, build them up into position ratings, and then unit ratings, offense and defense, and then overall roster strength rating. That basically makes up about half of our calculation. We also throw in team performance ratings, which have absolutely nothing to do with team talent or those individual player ratings. Pardon me. It's just, how did this team perform? I'm not sure what all that's about. My apologies. Not sure, or excuse me, those team performance ratings, just how did a team perform on the field, stats only. Advanced stats, wins and losses don't matter, but we're looking at things like points per drive, yards per pass attempt. We look at offensive line performance, defensive line performance, all that good stuff. Throw that into the mix. We throw our head coach ratings into the mix, which are just team performance ratings based specifically on head coach performance. And then that ends up giving us an overall power rating, which we use to project point spreads. We use to determine, who would be favored over who on a neutral field. And most of the time, it works pretty well for us. You can dig into all these numbers are available in our team profiles, in our 2023 team profiles. There's a tab called the ATS database. It includes how our team strength ratings perform against the spread dating back to 2018 when we started. We've now gone through 6 full seasons. Only one of those did we have a losing record. That was in 2021. The past 2 years, we've been over 52% against the spread each of the last 2 years. You can look at how we stack up against some of the best models in the industry, some of the smartest folks out there. Man, I'm really struggling here. Sorry. So, those numbers, how they stack up, you can look at things like the prediction tracker. You can look at some of the other trackers out there. We've performed really quite well. I feel pretty good about it. You can also look at how our numbers do projecting win totals each of the last 3 seasons in our official conference previews, those podcasts on the CFP Winning Edge podcast. Each of the last 3 years, we give, okay, this is what our team strength ratings project for all FBS teams. How do we do? We're at over 60% combined over the last 3 years. We were at 55.6% last season. So that was our worst season, but still feel very good about hitting these team win totals over or under at, over a 60% mark each of the last 3 seasons. All that to say, when you look at our power ratings, sometimes we get a really, really unexpected result. And that's what happened this year. When we were going through those ACC ratings, when we were looking at our overall power ratings, I ran down, this is what we think our top 10, our top 15, our top 25 was over the last several weeks. And there was a team that I just didn't even think about that did not expect them, maybe not only to pop up in our top 25, certainly did not expect them to end up as our number 1 rated team in the ACC, did not expect them to end up as a top 10 team in our overall power ratings. But, drum roll if you haven't figured it out already, we right now have SMU, the new ACC team, moving up from the American as our number 1 rated team in the ACC. They come in right now at number 7 in our overall team strength power ratings. And it was a shock to me. Like I expected SMU to be pretty good, right? They won 11 games last year. They won the American, did it with a backup quarterback, somewhat surprising. Went undefeated in conference play. Preston Stone, highly rated recruit coming out of high school, 4-star, played quite well last season, threw for nearly 3,200 yards, 28 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, averaged about 9.5 yards per pass attempt. He goes down with an injury, really gruesome looking injury. But Kevin Jennings steps in, plays great, and plays well enough, I should say, gets the job done. SMU wins the conference title and, returns a good bit of last year's team. They currently rank top 10 in our overall returning production numbers, top 10 in adjusted returning production overall, 17th on the offensive side of the ball, 20th on the defensive side of the ball. Stone coming back is big, a little bit of a question mark because he didn't get a whole lot of practice time in as he recovers from injury. How will he, fully recover? But very deep at running back with Jalen Knight and LJ Johnson, Kamar Wheaton returning. Very deep at receiver with Jake Bailey, Moochie Dixon, Romello Brinson, Jordan Hudson, Keyshawn Smith, Roderick Daniels, all those guys coming back as wide receivers. They also bring in Brashard Smith, who was a wide receiver at Miami, playing running back now. Tight end RJ Maryland, one of the most productive at the position. The offensive line was expected to bring back 5 full-time starters, lose 2 of those guys. Branson Hickman transferred to Oklahoma. Marcus Bryant transferred to Missouri. Those are big losses. Losing 2 of those teams to 2 of those players to SEC opponents. They're expected to be penciled in as starters. Those are going to be big losses. But 3 players coming back with at least 9 starts under their belt. They also add in a couple of talented transfers to the mix as well, with Savion Byrd and Nate Anderson, as well as added Quayshawn Sapp a couple of days ago, who started his career at Florida State. So, there's maybe not as big of a major drop off there, despite losing 2 of their best players up front. But almost everybody else is back. If you're looking at just number of starters, which is something we don't talk a whole lot about. They have 5, 6, 7, 8 returning starters on the offensive side of the ball. And then on the defensive side, number of starters, a little less, 5 total, according to, did this player start 51% or more games last season. But the level of experience on the defense, and they did boost, especially in the front 7, really the defensive line specifically, with some incoming transfers. But if you look at our projected depth charts on the defensive side of the ball right now for SMU, when you have a chance to look at them when they're published in early May, you'll see a very, very quite frankly, old unit. It's 6th-year senior, 5th-year senior, 6th-year senior, 6th-year senior, 6th-year senior. Just across the board, just a ton of experience, guys who played, 50%, 60%, 70%, 80% of team snaps last year, guys who were incredibly productive, like Elijah Roberts at defensive end, Isaiah Nwokobi at safety. Those guys had 21 and 14 production points respectively last year. So SMU recruited at a pretty high level, especially for an AAC team. They also brought in a lot of transfers who were, highly rated recruits. A good chunk of them from Miami, followed Rhett Lashley, or had a connection to Rhett Lashley when he was the offensive coordinator there. And so, throw that bit of just raw talent into our calculations, adjust it for the level of experience of a top 10 returning production team. And SMU is 6th in our overall roster strength rating, 7th on the offensive side of the ball, 10th on the defensive side of the ball. Team performance last year, they played like a top 20 team on offense. They were 17th. They were 14th on defense. They were 13th in overall team performance. Rhett Lashley right now ranks 21st in our head coach rating. So was that the benefit of playing a weaker schedule? Perhaps. That's something that does concern me, because last year, despite the good numbers that we had overall, we were way too high in our power ratings on UCF, BYU, Houston, and Cincinnati, the teams that moved from Group of Five conferences, or independent in BYU's case, into the Big 12. So I'm very nervous that perhaps, these things that worked out quite well for us. SMU is a team that we pretty much nailed last year, quite honestly. We have a good track record with FSU. They've been SMU. They've been one of the teams that have performed, I think we sort of have, I don't know. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but we've had a pretty good track record of being higher on SMU than most, and it ended up paying off for us, and that worked out last year specifically. Will it work out this year? I have absolutely no clue. But the schedule actually sets up pretty well for us. And so I was going through trying to figure out, okay, this SMU ranking scares me. It was completely unexpected. I would have expected Florida State or Clemson, maybe Miami to break in and end up being right there in the mix as certainly better than an SMU, certainly higher rated, I would have expected in our power rankings. But should we make an adjustment? Because last year, even though it was an incredibly small sample size, it was pretty clear that the teams that moved into the Big 12, we just had an overinflated or overrated team strength rating for those teams. Is SMU in that category again? Or, do we just sort of let it ride and trust our process that this SMU team does have power conference talent? There are tons of former 4-stars on the roster. There are tons of guys who signed with power conference teams coming out of high school. And, when you think of players that ended up transferring from places like Miami, from other, power conference schools, sometimes those guys are just busts. They were a little overrated coming out of high school. And SMU probably has a few of those in the mix as well. But, I think if you look player by player, I don't know, the transfer that ended up at SMU, a little better perhaps than what you might expect for a player moving from a Power 5, former Power 5, now Power 4 conference to Group of 5. So I am rambling, I know, but trying to sort of, on the one hand, talk myself into, okay, maybe we're not totally crazy here with SMU, but also, if we are, what do we do? If it's just clear to everybody else out there that our SMU ranking is just ridiculous, and you can look at how do we compare to an SP Plus, for example. Last check, SMU was 27th in Bill Connolly's SP Plus ratings at ESPN. That's not, that actually made me feel pretty good. They're a fringe top 25 team, not a top 10 team, of course, but still not completely, expected to be middle of the pack nationally. They're considered a very, very good team, and returning production is definitely part of that. Part of Bill's rankings, part of his rating system. But SMU is certainly behind Florida State, who's 12th, behind Clemson, who's 16th, behind Miami and Louisville, 21st and 24th, respectively. Right there on par with NC State and Virginia Tech. So that feels to me a little more correct than SMU being 7th nationally and 1st in the ACC. I will fully admit that. So what should we do? Should we do some sort of penalty for SMU moving up to a power conference situation? Should they be just take off 5%? Or what's the route to what we should do? And that has gone through my mind. I've considered maybe every team that's changing conferences, because things just get a little more complicated. You're playing a lot of opponents for the first time. The travel schedule for SMU specifically, but think of Cal and Stanford. Certainly, they're traveling a lot more miles now than they were in the past when they were in the Pac-12. Should they be penalized in some way for that? Should we, just put something there in the power ratings calculation to say first year in a new conference, or first year moving up from a Power 5 or to a Power 4 conference from a Group of 5 conference? Should they, get docked for that in some way? Part of me says maybe we should, but also part of me knows we've been doing this for 6 years, and for the most part, I've tried my very, very best to just be hands off about it. Because there's hundreds, thousands probably of hours that go into these team profiles, that go into building these team strength ratings. Starting at that individual player rating, building all the way up. If we don't trust it, what's the point? If we go through, going player by player, position by position, year by year when it comes to team performance or head coach ratings, and it ends up spitting out an unexpected result, and we just say, you know what, actually, that's wrong. Get SMU out of here, put them, in the 25 range. Then what's the point of going through all that work? So it's something that I struggle with a little bit, honestly, to try to figure out. We might end up looking just incredibly, incredibly silly. There are probably folks out there right now who think, this is ridiculous. SMU 7th in the country, 1st in the ACC. I understand that. Again, your eyes probably have shown you that SMU doesn't quite stack up with Florida State or Clemson. Some other very smart analytic models and very smart people certainly, don't have SMU this high. We might completely whiff. SMU might struggle like Cincinnati did last year, and end up fighting and clawing to get to bowl eligibility, if that. So it's very, very possible we could end up looking incredibly, incredibly silly with SMU being our highest rated ACC team. But also, like I said, the schedule stacks up decently well. If we just let it ride, it's possible it ends up working out for us okay, because SMU has a non-conference schedule. They start a week early with a trip to Nevada. They play week 0. That's kind of an interesting element in all of this. So going to take on a what should be a pretty poor Nevada team in a first year with a first year head coach. Then they come back, host Houston Christian, FCS opponent, which they right now in our projected power ratings, we have SMU as a 60-point favorite in that game. BYU, one of those teams that does rank pretty low as far as power conference teams in our rating. They're actually, I believe, the second lowest team currently in our team strength power ratings. So they host BYU, get a week off before they host rival TCU. And then ACC play starts. It starts with a bang. They play Florida State, but it's at home with an extra week to prepare. And the week before, I believe Florida State plays Clemson. So Florida State has to go go to SMU on September 28th. Then on October 5th, they would host Clemson, and what most would expect would be, preview of the ACC championship game or the top two teams there. So is that a game where I expect anyone else to have SMU favored? Probably not. But right now, we do have SMU favored over Florida State that game by about a field goal. SMU also follows up with a pretty tough opponent. They have to go to Louisville, who we have as a top 25 type team in our current ratings based on a lot of talent accumulation that Louisville has done under Jeff Brom, as we'll discuss a little bit more in depth, not as in depth as we're going here on SMU, but so we'll find out real quick probably if SMU is really going to be a factor in the ACC title race. Getting Florida State, getting Louisville back to back. That trip to Louisville is key. It's the first of 3 straight road games for SMU, which is not ideal, but SMU does get a week off between Louisville and then a trip to Stanford. Stanford is our lowest rated Power 5 team. So, expect that SMU is going to be able to take care of business there, or at least they will be favored to do so, we would expect. And then once you get Florida State out of the way and Louisville out of the way, it opens up pretty well for SMU. There is no Clemson on the list. There is no Miami on the schedule. There's no North Carolina or NC State. So if we're looking at our power rankings, which are SMU number 1, Florida State number 2, Clemson number 3, Louisville number 4, Miami number 5, North Carolina number 6, and NC State number 7, Virginia Tech number 8. Virginia Tech's not on here either. So yeah, they get Florida State and they get Louisville, and then basically they end up playing the bottom half of the ACC the rest of the way. At Stanford, at Duke, home against Pitt, a third bye week. So SMU is actually going to be a little fresher than most. Most everybody gets 2 weeks off this year in 2024. SMU gets 3. Then they they host Boston College, a trip to Virginia, and host Cal. So, is SMU actually the best team in the ACC? I'm skeptical of that. But could they end up making it to the ACC championship game? And once you get there, all bets are off. You can beat anybody on any given Saturday, maybe. So if SMU is able to navigate this schedule, whether it's with 1 ACC loss or maybe even 2, they still might be able to be a factor at the top end of the ACC standing. So we might be wrong, certainly evaluating SMU's team strength, but it also might end up working out for us if SMU is able to take advantage of what looks like a really, really manageable schedule. So a lot of time on SMU. They're our team of the day. We're going to go ahead and cross them off the list there. But I did want to focus in a little bit on where did this rating come from? This is an old team. It's a pretty talented team on paper. It's a team that has been good in the past, has been productive, and it brings back so many of those players. And even though there are a couple of important, key players moving on, especially on that offensive line, the replacements look decent on paper. So I think SMU is perhaps going to be, I don't know. I'm going to be very, very interested to see how it shakes up, how the season ends up working itself out for SMU specifically, but the ACC as a whole. So should Florida State be our number 1 rated team? Maybe. They're 10th in our overall power rankings. I did expect that they were going to be our highest rated ACC team. Adding DJ Uiagalelei, I think, is going to set up a really nice, smooth transition from Jordan Travis at quarterback. The transfers that Florida State brought in, guys like Roydell Williams, Malik Benson, who we hope is going to be fully healthy after suffering an injury this spring. Those guys are going to step in, be playmakers. Am a little bit concerned about the wide receiver group as a whole. but feel like Florida State is going to be playing at a top 30 level of offense. Last year, they finished 27th in our offensive team performance ratings. That did include a little bit of that end of season, but only the end of the regular season, because we don't factor in bowl games or conference title games into those team performance ratings. So Florida State ended up, maybe a little bit better than you might have expected based on just how that offense fell off a cliff with Jordan Travis going down. Their defense stacks up as a top 25 level unit talent wise. I mentioned very early on when we first talked about Florida State that perhaps it seems like we're actually underrating Florida State's roster strength on the defensive side of the ball right now. I think that certainly is possible. I think that is going to be a very, very solid unit. But overall, Florida State, if you were to tell me that they are or should be the ACC favorite, I think that's very, very reasonable. This is a good team. Probably not quite as good as last year's, especially when it was fully healthy, but definitely a team capable of winning the ACC, and I think understandably a lot of folks' favorites. Clemson is a team that traditionally our power ratings have been very, very high on. We were higher on Clemson last year than just about anybody. It did not work out well for us. 4 ACC losses was certainly a disappointment. This year, Clemson, I think, we have them reasonably ranked third in the ACC, 14th overall, but I wouldn't be shocked if this Clemson team ends up playing its way, to an ACC title. If we see a big second-year improvement from Cade Klubnik as the starting quarterback, then that's going to be, of course, key to this. Antonio Williams being back fully healthy will be, a big part of that. Tyler Brown, who missed some time this spring with injury after a big freshman season for him. If they get Adam Randall back, Tony Stellato, that wide receiver core is certainly going to be worth watching injury-wise, because that was not a healthy unit this spring, was not a healthy unit last year. Going to need to see some improvement there, but Phil Maffa, running back, I think is going to be able to step in, carry a heavy workload with Will Shipley moving on to the NFL. Really like Maffa, like this defense as well. Ranks 20th right now in our roster strength ratings on the defensive side of the ball. Played like a top 10 unit, including the very best against the pass last season in our team performance numbers. Inexperience as far as, just level of starters returning. A little bit, but Clemson, as you know, has traditionally played a lot of players. So guys who are in that, too deep are getting more on-field experience than most backups elsewhere. So that probably, I think, will end up paying off pretty well for Clemson this year. That middle tier, and it is it is crowded. All right. So we have probably, maybe I shouldn't make this cutoff, but in my mind, we have to include SMU in that top tier, whether I want to or not. And then Florida State and Clemson, I think, are certainly worthy of them. All four, top 15 teams nationally. Louisville right now is 16th in our ratings. I did make a little bit of a break there. I don't fully trust Louisville. I know they had 10 wins last season, ended up just a very, very solid team. They rank and rate quite well in things like our roster strength numbers. A lot of that through the transfer portal, which can be a little bit tricky. Right now we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 first-year transfers projected as starters on the offensive side of the ball, 4 first-year transfers as starters on the defensive side of the ball, and then 8 in the two deep on the defense. So it's tough to get everybody to mesh in 1 year. Probably, certainly it's much more common to try to do so in college football today with so much movement, but still, I'm a little nervous that, is Louisville going to be able to do that 2 years in a row? They're relying very heavily on Tyler Shuck at quarterback. He has not been able to stay healthy for several years now. The wide receiver group, I think there's a lot to like about Colin Lacey, the transfer from South Alabama, Ja'Cory Brooks, who we expect is going to be back and fully healthy and one of the top options there. Chris Bell had a huge spring, so that is good news, even though they lost Penny Boone, who made a quick stop there for the spring at running back. Don Chaney, Maurice Turner, feel like they're going to be able to run the football as well, or perhaps even a little bit better than they did last year when they ranked 31st in our offensive team performance running the football. Defensively, this was a top 20 unit last year, and they're a little more experienced on the defensive side of the ball. Top 20 in our returning production numbers defensively. That's going to be an area of strength, I think, and something they're really going to lean on. Miami is a team, and I think I failed to mention this before if this is your first time listening. These power ratings, they are what they are right now. Snapshot at a window in time. These change. They change week to week during the season. They will change in the preseason. And if Miami lands Damian Martinez, for instance, if they land Tyler Barron, one of the higher rated defensive players in the transfer portal, spent the spring at Louisville, seen some things to suggest that, one, Martinez was actually tweeted out a picture of him being in Miami or Coral Gables this week, but Miami's connected to some other potentially impact players that are still in the transfer portal. They might move a little bit up into maybe that first tier, maybe into a top 15 national rating. They're 18th for us right now. So even though they're 5th in the ACC, I think they are definitely in the mix potentially to make a run at ACC title game. I think that this is a pretty wide open conference as a whole. And we've been traditionally in our team strength power ratings. I talk about we have a pretty good track record with SMU. We don't have a very good track record with Miami. We've been too high on Miami far more often than not. But this year, it almost feels like we're a little too low with them 18th. I could certainly see them jumping into that top tier, very much on par with a Florida State or a Clemson. North Carolina is a team that I've mentioned, very briefly in a few times when we've talked power ratings, top 25, maybe a little bit of a post-type sleeper. Losing Drake May is big. Number 3 pick in the draft last night. Max Johnson, well-traveled, but very experienced. Think that if it goes, if the job goes to him, they're going to rate quite well. If it goes to Connor Harrell, it seems like they're, pretty close based on the reports coming out of spring practice. There's a bit of a drop off there when we look at our individual player rating. So if Harrell ended up winning this job, North Carolina probably falls out of our top 25 nationally. They're 19th right now, 6th in the ACC. I'm very concerned about what that wide receiver group is going to look like because, as we talked about on Wednesday, so many players sat out the spring game due to injuries at both wide receiver and tight end. So hopefully those guys get back and fully healthy. But Omarion Hampton, one of the best running backs in the country, an offensive line that I've heard some positive reports. They're relying on probably 3 first-year transfer starters, only 1 starter coming back fully. But right now in roster strength, this offense ranks top 10 in the country. They rank top 30 defensively, which of course has been the major issue for North Carolina last year, where they were a sub FBS average defense. In the middle tiers, I was a little bit surprised that NC State and Virginia Tech are still outside of our top 25. I think they're both very, very interesting teams and going to be very competitive week in and week out. Virginia Tech is one of the top rated teams, ranked teams in our returning production numbers. NC State really sort of remade that offense this spring. We discussed that. And then after that, there are a lot of really, really interesting teams in the 40s or 50s right now in our overall power ratings. Syracuse, I think, taking a big step forward. There's a lot to like about what Fran Brown and his new coaching staff have done on the recruiting trail. Will it pay off in year one is certainly a question. But I think Kyle McCord should solidify that quarterback job. LaQuint Allen, very talented, productive running back. They need some weapons at wide receiver, but they've been working on that the last couple of weeks, as we've discussed. But Syracuse, I think, really long term, I'm excited about. In the short term, certainly a lot of unknowns. And then, Cal is in a tough spot. They're going to be traveling so much, but have some really interesting pieces. Jaden Ott at running back, certainly one of the best in the country. Georgia Tech has one of the most experienced offenses in the country, and a unit that was really, really solid last year. That wide receiver group is excellent. Haynes King, great year last season. Excited to see what he can do in year two. Will the defense be better? And if so, they might be a team that could move into that top half of the ACC. Duke lost a ton, and they're going to be difficult to project. New coach, new starting quarterback Malik Murphy, not a great recruiter traditionally, very similar to our team at 13, Wake Forest, where they did bring in an experienced quarterback in Hank Bachmeier, but he didn't necessarily nail down that job this spring. Will they be leaning on the running game as well? A lot of these ACC teams have a potential star at running back and some questions elsewhere. Damon Claiborne, that guy at Wake Forest, curious to see what he can do. We've talked a lot of Pitt this spring so far. They don't rank particularly well, lost some key pieces on defense this spring to the portal, but have some experience. They're excited about Nate Yardnell at quarterback, even though he doesn't rate particularly high the way we calculate things. Perhaps they'll be a little more consistent at that quarterback position this year. That could pay off. Boston College is a team that I'm excited about. I like Thomas Castellanos at quarterback. He is a little bit volatile. We talked about how he performed in the spring game that was up and down, but a very exciting player. Doesn't necessarily seem like maybe the perfect fit for what we expect of a Bill O'Brien coached offense, but I'm interested to see how Boston College plays this year. And then Virginia and Stanford, I mean, it's going to be tough, but even though those teams are the bottom two in our ACC power ratings, I think that, you could certainly see a scenario where that Virginia offense continues to be explosive. The wide receiver group as a whole, I think, is a little bit deeper than it was last year, even though they lose Malik Washington. Quarterback, they've got probably two guys. Musket had a good spring, Tony Musket. He wasn't the most exciting player last year. Anthony Calandria, who got an opportunity with Musket injured, was much more of that. You could see the high-end potential, just sort of a chaotic, fun, good element that he brought to the offense. But I think either of those guys are going to be able to do some good things offensively, and Virginia is a little healthier on the defensive side of the ball as well, I think. So hopefully that will pay off for them. And then Stanford is a team that player for player in those raw recruiting ratings looks pretty good on paper, but just haven't been able to bring it together. The depth has been an issue because when you look after that, starting lineup, the numbers just aren't quite there. I do like Troy Taylor as an offensive, play designer, offensive development type coach. Did a lot of really, really interesting things at Sacramento State at the FCS level. I think we saw some flashes, some glimpses of that last year, but the travel situation is going to be difficult. The depth, I think, is going to be an issue as well. So even though Stanford certainly, I think, could play its way into maybe that middle of the ACC, right now they're starting out looking up at the rest of the league. So 17 teams in this new ACC. We spent 45 minutes on it. I probably rambled quite a lot, so my apologies for that. But this is a really, really intriguing conference to me, and my interest has piqued even more just because of that unexpected SMU projection. I mean, we've got SMU right now. I looked deeper at the schedule. How do we look game by game right now? And I didn't pull up if there's a book out there that has a win total right now. I'm not sure, but I have I imagine we are going to be over, because right now we project SMU for over 9.5 wins, 6 wins in conference play. We have SMU favored in every regular season game, including at home against Florida State and at Louisville. Those are the toss-ups. Those are both in the 50% win projection mode. Do I expect SMU is going to be able to go through and run the table? No, I do not. 1 or 2 losses in the ACC seem very likely to happen, but I don't know. Maybe this SMU team is a little bit better than any of us thought. And so maybe all that work that we're putting into these numbers, maybe we should trust them. I'm prepared to look very, very silly if SMU ends up just completely missing the mark. But I don't know. Maybe that work will end up paying off, and SMU will be much more of a title contender than just about anybody expected. So moving on, we're going to give a few quick transfer notes and injury report. Finish with some spring game notes from the group of 5 as we finish the week. But looking ahead to the future, we certainly do have some spring games this weekend that we will recap, but then we will start to slow things down just a little bit, dig a little bit more into sort of team by team strengths, weaknesses, questions. As I said, that light at the end of the tunnel for our team profiles, I can see it now. The fog is starting to lift a little bit, and I think this SMU surprise maybe helped with that a little bit. I'm starting to think a little more specifically football focused, which feels good. And once these team profiles are out in the world, there'll continue to be plenty of work done on them, but I'll actually be able to go back and start thinking in football terms, really start digging more into, watching game replays and things like that, and starting to develop my own opinions, which I'll start to fold in a little bit more to these reports and to these numbers as we continue here on Good Morning College Football. But wrapping up with an injury report out of Arizona. Justin Spears of the Arizona Daily Star wrote up and tweeted out about Tet McMillian, who is dealing with a lower body injury. Spears wrote that McMillian was sidelined with a leg injury he sustained in a one-on-one battle with cornerback Tacario Davis during Saturday's practice at Arizona Stadium. McMillian walked to the locker room and missed the rest of practice on Saturday. On Tuesday, he wore a walking boot on his left foot and moved around the practice fields on a scooter. One of those one-legged scooters. That's never a great sign. At that point, he said his status for the rest of the week was unknown. Followed that up with a tweet, I believe, on Thursday, where head coach Wednesday, according to Brennan, McMillian had, quote, had a little procedure on Wednesday. He is in good spirits. He's a total warrior, and we expect him back for the season. So that good news, perhaps, that McMillian, this isn't something that's going to really sideline him, but expect him back for the season is kind of curious wording. Will he be back day one fall camp? Will he be able to go through summer workouts and things like that? McMillian is one of the very best players in college football, so he's probably going to be fine. But will he be 100% for Arizona come week 1? That's something we're going to have to keep an eye out for. A few other notes that Spears had from that Arizona practice on Thursday said that Malachi Riley, the sophomore wide receiver, had a 50-yard touchdown pass from quarterback Noah Fafita. So perhaps Riley, maybe a little bit of an opportunity to be more involved in this passing attack with McMillian sidelined. Hopefully not for very long, but freshman running back Jordan Washington got a blurb from Spears, had a 30 yards in one team period. Reading here from the piece, said Washington planted his foot near the line of scrimmage, cut toward the right sideline for a huge gain and the most noticeable rep for him this spring. Said Washington needs a year in Arizona's strength and conditioning program, but the Long Beach, California native is oozing with potential. Well, little did we know that not long after this practice, apparently, that 4-star running back entered the transfer portal. So Jordan Washington is, according to reports, moving on. So good practice, finished, I guess, his Arizona career on a high note, but curious to see where he ends up. And the running back situation, still dealing with Quali Conley, the San Jose State transfer, who has been out with a leg injury. But according to Spears' report on Thursday, Conley did not have a boot on his foot. So perhaps that's a good sign moving forward. Some transfer news. At Syracuse, again, a team that has been kind of somewhat quietly accumulating some experience, some talent. They added a big piece literally to the offensive line with Savion Washington, who was a starter at right tackle for Colorado, previously at Kent State. So add him to the mix for that Syracuse offensive line. Minnesota picked up a couple of interesting transfers, including a 4-star former Georgia recruit, number 111 overall last year in the 247 Sports ratings, I believe, according to Ryan Burns, who covers the Gophers for the 247 site there. That's Tyler Williams, the Georgia transfer, ends up at Minnesota. They also added a quarterback from Virginia Tech this week as well. So Minnesota active in the transfer portal. Texas A&M offensive lineman Bryce Foster, who's a starter at center for the Aggies, has 28 career starts, former top 100 recruit who spent his spring working with the track and field program, did not participate in spring practice for that new Aggies coaching staff. Well, he is now in the transfer portal. So a very experienced center is on the open market. Hey, maybe SMU might be interested, having lost its center to Oklahoma. Me now sort of as a de facto SMU fan because of our ratings, hoping we don't just look incredibly stupid. I'm rooting for SMU to add some talent if they can. At Auburn, who's been very, very active. We mentioned the work that Auburn did adding to its defensive line group earlier this week, but they added a major impact receiver, Keandre Lambert-Smith, who was the highest rated receiver in just about every talent or transfer rating that I saw available on the market, is going to Auburn. He caught 53 passes for 673 yards and 4 touchdowns in 11 games for the Nittany Lions last year. Not the biggest numbers, and there had been a little bit of I don't know the right word, but things were not necessarily trending in the best direction for Lambert-Smith. It seemed like when he left Penn State, I don't know if maybe this was spin or what. This is just speculation on my part, but it almost seemed like maybe both sides decided it was time to move on. Nevertheless, Auburn, we talked a lot about Cam Coleman, the talented freshman who looks like a starter coming out of spring. That's big, but this Auburn receiving group needed more experience. They brought in Robert Lewis, transfer from Georgia State. He had over 100 targets last year and 881 yards, 7 touchdowns on 70 catches. But beyond that, there really wasn't a clear indication that this Auburn receiving group really had the talent to compete at the SEC in that room. We've seen guys like Jay Farr transfer out, but the spring, Caleb Burton III, Cam Brown were competing for starting reps, which they've had some injuries in that room in the past, and so perhaps that's a little why that unit wasn't super productive last year. But obviously, it seemed to most outsiders, and our numbers back this up as well, that wide receiver was in a position where there certainly was room for improvement. And so, Keandre Lambert-Smith, is he going to be an all SEC receiver? That's probably not necessarily the expectation, but adding some experience, adding a good, talented, hopefully dependable, consistent player at that position is, I think, good for Auburn overall, a team that is sort of fringe top 25 right now in our power ratings, 11th in the SEC, but 28th right now. And they do have top 25 talent in terms of our roster strength ratings, both on offense and defense now with this move. A couple of other notes here. Alabama lost the player who had gotten the vast majority, I believe, of their snaps at center this spring to the transfer portal. James Brockermeyer entered the portal earlier this week. A couple of interesting tight ends on the move for the second time this spring. Chaman Medier, the Cincinnati transfer who spent the spring at Colorado, entered the portal. He is now headed to Arizona State. And then Corey Dyches, who we talked about when Charlotte was our team of the week, or team of the day on Wednesday as a big pickup for the 49ers, is reversing course and heading instead to Cal, he announced on Thursday. So Cal, a team we didn't spend much time talking about today, but has one of the best running backs in the ACC in the country in Jordan Jadnot, has some talent at receiver, but could use more playmakers in the passing game, and has an ongoing quarterback competition. Corey Dyches being able to be thrown into the mix, I think is a big move for that Cal offense. So curious to see how that ends up shaking out. Louisville, one area that the Cards really were in desperate need of due to at least one outgoing transfer earlier this spring, was linebacker. Well, they have added two in the past couple of days, actually. Miles Jernigan, the transfer from Cal, outside linebacker, edge defender, but we're penciling him in right now as more of a traditional linebacker in our projected depth charts. He and Dan Foster, who's a 12-game starter at Texas State, not super productive, but experienced, really, I think, gives that group a little bit of a boost. It had ranked as one of the lowest linebacker groups in any power conference in our current ratings, but brings that a little bit more up to sort of the average level, which is going to be key for Louisville as they attempt to be in the mix in that ACC title hunt, as we discussed. A player to keep an eye on, Steven Dix, Marshall linebacker, entered the transfer portal. He was highly productive and a former Power 4 recruit as well. And then Rashad Amos, who we mentioned maybe this time last week when he committed to Mississippi State, has now decommitted and is expected. Don't know that this is official before we hit play today. He had been predicted to end up at Colorado, had been on a visit there, I believe. So not sure if he's officially committed yet, but that perhaps is imminent. And finally, a few spring game takeaways at San Diego State. Kurt Kinney of the San Diego Union Tribune and Trevor Speetson of the Daily Aztec were among those who were on hand for the spring game last weekend, where there are four quarterbacks competing to start. Florida State sophomore transfer A.J. Duffy, as he has all spring, got reps with the ones, but not yet named the starter. Duffy was 7 of 11 for 112 yards. It included a 36-yard touchdown pass to Colorado State transfer Louis Brown IV. High expectations for Brown potentially in that Aztec fast offense. Also, Duffy had a 36-yarder to USC transfer tight end Jude Wolfe. The number 2 quarterback, a little bit of a surprise for most, Javance Tupuola Johnson was getting the number 2 reps for the Aztecs ahead of sophomore Kyle Crum and true freshman Danny O'Neill. So keep that in mind. But Duffy still seemingly is the favorite you would expect to win that job for San Diego State, and what should be a fun offense, taking a big step forward compared to what we've seen the last few years, really the last, I guess, decade or so, dating back to the early days of the Rocky Long tenure there. But with the wide receivers, Brown led the group with 5 catches and 79 yards. Jashawn Polk, the transfer from Kent State, did not play in the spring game. He had a low leg injury that is expected to be minor. The rushing totals didn't really give us a lot of insight onto how that pecking order is looking early in the spring. We talked about that Keenan Christian was sort of referred to as the starter at running back. Not 100% sure that's still the case, but probably expect that he'll be in line for those first carries of the season. But Lucky Sutton was actually the player who got the most work, 11 carries, 36 yards, had a 1-yard touchdown in the spring game. Jacksonville State, Maxwell Donaldson of the Gadsden Times and Thomas Ashworth of the Anniston Star both had write-ups from past weekend's spring game, where Donaldson noted that Zion Turner, the transfer from UConn, was actually the first quarterback with the first team offense going up against the first team defense in the spring game. That was a little bit of a surprise because the experienced player coming back, and Turner was a starter 2 years ago as a true freshman for UConn, but Logan Smothers, who, was kind of a co-starter at times. It looked like maybe he had wrestled that job away from Zion Webb last season for Jacksonville State. Most expected him to be the starter, and actually in I just lost my note in the one of the write-up, the Anderson Star, Ashworth's write-up, still referred to Smothers as the favorite to win that job. Smothers has been dealing with a shoulder injury, according to Ashworth, and still rehabbing that, so maybe that played into it a little bit. But Turner is in the mix, and it's expected that this quarterback competition is going to get even more crowded. One, the addition of Tyler Huff, who is a very experienced quarterback at the FCS level at Furman. Also, according to some quotes in these pieces, sounds like perhaps head coach Rich Rodriguez is still actively looking to add via the transfer portal. He was quoted here saying, it's hard to tell today with the quarterbacks because it was so wet. There was apparently like an hour plus delay due to just some heavy rains, bad weather for the spring game. It's hard to throw the ball, but I think we're going to be deeper there at the quarterback position. So be on the lookout for that. Quote, we don't have depth in certain positions right now, and that's about every position. Running back, major issue, where multiple players transferred out this spring. There were only 2 scholarship running backs available for the spring game. So a couple of names kind of getting extra touches in sort of a gadget way, Swiss Army knife way to perhaps keep an eye on. Carter Lambert, who's listed as a quarterback, played running back and wide receiver in the spring game, so they're looking to get him involved in multiple ways. And DeMarcus Lacey, a transfer from North Alabama, listed as a wide receiver on the roster and expected to play mostly a slot position, it sounds like. But Lacey was actually the leading rusher at FCS's North Alabama last season with nearly 600 yards and 3 touchdowns on 121 carries. He was an all-conference performer as a freshman and kind of multi-use weapon with over 500 total yards of offense, 300 plus receiving, 200 plus rushing. So an interesting name to keep note there. But Lacey did suffer an injury in the spring game. So perhaps maybe we won't get too excited about him just yet until we figure out exactly the extent of that. At South Alabama, Craig Stevenson of AL.com does great work, tons of great write-ups on the Jags, but noted that Gio Lopez, who is coming off an MVP performance in the bowl game for South Alabama, had a dreadful spring game, statistically speaking. Reading here from Stevenson's piece, Lopez was competing with Bishop Davenport, redshirt sophomore, and true freshman Jared Hollins, who we're probably going to have to remember that name just in case. Reading here said all 3 quarterbacks on the roster played Saturday, combining to complete just 13 of 41 passes for 166 yards and 1 touchdown. Lopez did not complete any of his 13 passes and was also intercepted once. So 1 spring game, any stats from the spring game, we take them with a little bit of a grain of salt, but that's not great. But it's not like Davenport really outplayed him. He was 4 of 13 for 41 yards through 2 interceptions, did have a 55-yard touchdown run. But the best, statistically speaking, was Hollins, who, while as Stevenson noted, played mostly against second-team defense. Completed 9 of 15 passes for 125 yards and a touchdown, including a 25-yarder to transfer tight end Andrew Bench. He was also intercepted once as well. Some news this morning related to South Alabama linebacker Khalil Jacobs, who entered the transfer portal briefly earlier in the spring and then withdrew, is back in, according to reports. Alabama was immediately expected to be in the mix, where, of course, former South Alabama head coach Kane Womack is the defensive coordinator for the Crimson Tide. At Utah State, and we touched on this very briefly, Scott Gerard, the play-by-play announcer for the Aggies and KSL Sports, and then also Jason Turner of the Herald Journal, had some quotes from Blake Anderson, the head coach, who discussed, shed a little light on McCray Helsted, who has since committed to BYU, why he and Cooper Legas both entered the transfer portal. It's because Anderson told them that Spencer Petras, the former Iowa starting quarterback, who last year was in more of a student assistant role for the Hawkeyes, did not play football, has since come in, won the job, and seemingly will be the starting quarterback for Utah State in 2024. Anderson quoted here talking about the decision, said, so they got equal reps with the ones. They both got limited reps. He's talking about Cooper Legas and McKay Hillstead. They both got limited reps with the twos, and over the course of a 3.5-4 weeks, the numbers and just the eye test all showed that Spencer Petras won the job. He turned the ball over one time through 13 practices, completed somewhere around 70-80% of his passes, made good checks, good decisions, and he had to clearly win the job. And as much as I love Coop and all the things he's done here, you've got basically a 6th, 7th-year professional in the room, and it shows, and he's made our team better. So Anderson was not surprised, it sounded like, that Cooper Legas entered the transfer portal. He was surprised that Hillstead did. Quote, we really only had 3 guys leave that we didn't expect to leave. And since then, actually, a couple of running backs have gone that perhaps were unexpected. We did not expect to see McKay leave, and that's the nature of quarterbacks. We wanted to, he wanted to be the starter, and when we named Spence the starter last week, we knew that was going to bring about some conversations. I felt like Coop might choose to leave. He's only got 1 year left. We're going to try to help him find a place to go play and get on the field, and we've been very open about it. I didn't expect McKay to leave. I understand why he did. At Arkansas State, Jeff Reed of A-State Nation and Mike Harley of the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette had some reaction to the Red Wolves spring game, where Jalen Rayner, quarterback, one of the most exciting quarterbacks in college football, quite frankly, in my opinion, really flashed as a true freshman. It was exciting to see what he did last year. Threw for 217 yards and 3 touchdowns in the spring game. Also had 24 yards on 4 carries. But another name to just sort of keep in mind, there's another highly rated true freshman quarterback at Arkansas State. Last name Flowers. Where was the first name? I lost it. My apologies. But completed 12 of 18 passes for 216 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Similar rushing numbers, 22 yards on 4 carries. But Malik Hornsby as well, formerly of Arkansas and Texas State, is a wide receiver, according to the roster. That was expected, but he's getting a little action at quarterback as well, which probably shouldn't be a big surprise. He attempted 2 passes, completed 1 for 8 yards, did have 3 carries for 24 yards and a touchdown, 1 reception for 17 yards. In some quotes here from Rayner about Hornsby. Quote, he's got crazy speed and you can put him in different places. Coach calls him a Swiss Army knife. You can put him in different places and he's going to make plays. He'll be a great addition to the team, and we're going to keep trying to mold him into our culture. One other name that was mentioned from the spring game, Reginald Harden Jr., 6'5" wide receiver who was a Division II transfer, had a strong performance. Josh Flowers, that's the freshman's name. Harden gave freshman Josh Flowers a big target, and the two connected for an 11-yard touchdown in the opening half. Last note here, there have been some notes from San Jose State, Jackson Moore, Andrew Pang, both of inside the Spartans have been on top of, what's the quarterback situation looking like there as San Jose State moves to more of a high octane passing offense under offensive coordinator Craig Stutzman. New head coach Ken Niumatalolo, not running the triple option. Again, we've said that several times, but keep that in mind. So who is going to be the quarterback? It sounds like Emmett Brown, the walk-on transfer from Washington State, is one of the top two, along with Walker Eggett. Jay Butterfield has been sort of up and down, it sounds like. And some days, when they talk to Niumatalolo and he says, it's top two. But then they talk to Stutzman and it sounds like, he's not ready maybe to name a top two. So maybe we shouldn't totally write off Butterfield yet. But earlier this week, Anthony Garcia, who was expected to maybe be in the mix in this quarterback competition as well, he had started to play a little bit of wide receiver, but has since transferred out and committed to Arizona. So will not be in the mix. But most reports, and there's been a little bit of up and down, and we'll follow it certainly as San Jose State enters its final stretch in spring practice. But Brown and Eggett have mostly been, sounds like, according to reports, the most consistent quarterbacks. But Jay Butterfield, the former four-star Oregon recruit, maybe don't write him off completely just yet, but certainly still, it sounds like, has some ground to make up. So that will do it for us. Thank you for bearing with me in that bit of a coughing fit I had earlier. Thank you for bearing with me as I tried to sort of walk through a therapy session of SMU being our highest rated team in our team strength power ratings. There'll be more discussion on that, I'm sure, as I try to work through that. But honestly, I talked about, do we give them some sort of penalty for moving conferences, for moving up from the group of five? I think probably we're just gonna let it ride. Hope for the best. Hope that manageable schedule works out in our favor. Hope that maybe our process is trust the process, I guess. And maybe SMU is not the best team in the ACC. Most would probably argue that they are not, and I certainly understand that. But I think we're just gonna go with it. And if we look silly, we might, but we're gonna trust what's worked for us pretty well in the past. So that's going to wrap it up for us this week. Thank you for joining me for Good Morning College Football, whether you're with us live, whether you are catching a replay on the Campus to Canton YouTube channel, where we very much would appreciate you liking the video, subscribing to that channel. And if you want to get a closer look at these team profiles, if we didn't scare you off with our power rankings today, they're going to be available in early May to our C2C Winning Edge and all 22 tier members at campustocanton.com. If you want to just try out the site, more the rankings, ADP for college fantasy football, Devi, C2C, of course, the C2C format where you have both a college team and an NFL team. Want access to the Discord? You can sign up for as little as $2.99 per month at campustocanton.com. So everyone have a wonderful weekend. We will be back on Monday. We'll be back on Monday talking more spring games and looking ahead to the 2024 preseason on Good Morning College Football. Nicholas Ian Allen, have a great rest of the day, and we'll talk again soon.